I'll take that. I'll take that as a yes. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Right, so in case none of you have Googled this beforehand, Stacko and Liam have been working on hooking up something called Beaker, which is essentially a runner that can spin up a Vagrant box for the Puppet Master, a Vagrant box for the client, and then obviously run all the provisioning scripts on them, and then you can then say, I want to apply a role, watch it execute, and then you can use something called server spec, which is just a set of RSpec tests, which can assert that your client is in the expected state. So it means you can essentially acceptance test your Puppet roles. So the basic one, the basic specs, I mean, it's just RSpec syntax. Can you guys all see that, yeah? Yeah. So this malark here is obviously just for Beaker. So it tells you, okay, I want an agent and I want a master. It then essentially echoes this config into the master. So you'll probably recognize that from the nodes.pp, which is essentially saying, okay, I just want to apply this profile to the agent. And then it says, okay, I'm going to run the agent, catch the failures, and afterwards we can assert some things. So at the moment, collectd doesn't export until the second run, so it actually ends up running it twice. But if you don't care about collectd, then you only need to run once. So the basic assertions we've got here, you can use server spec to assert pretty much anything, and what it does is takes this nice, friendly, fluent syntax, compiles a command underneath, SSHs into the box, runs the command, and inspects the result. So you've got various handlers for users, files, and there are loads of others that I'll show in a second, but basically it says should be a directory, should be owned by, etc., etc. The syntax is all really quite nice. It's an open source project, so you can write your own handlers if you want. The good thing about this syntax here is the fact that I don't have to use a role. So here we've got a base profile that houses some common code for our roles, the roles that we apply to, like location API, restaurant API, all that sort of thing. So I can just apply that individual role, that individual profile, or I can apply a whole role. So this is the one for the location API. And again, we don't really care about too much of the base stuff because it's covered in the base spec. But yeah, you can assert that the Nginx configuration is there, and also you can use the its content to just match a regex for the contents of the file. So far we're not using anything particularly complicated. I think these are all pretty much the same. The Mongo, so this is our Mongo role that we're just asserting on. So again, we just say, well, MongoD should be running, and I pick a few bits and pieces in the conf. You can assert the entire damn file if you want, but it's usually easier just to pick bits and go, okay, well, I expect it to look like this, look like that. There's no real witchcraft in here. The witchcraft is inside Beaker. So what I will just do now then is I'm just going to switch across to, come on,
you.
Me apparently, that one. So this is the reference really, the only reference that you'd need. You probably wouldn't need to muck about with Beaker. The only reference you'd need is the server spec. So
what's the difference?
So Beaker is the glue that runs up the Vagrant boxes underneath,
Right.
and then server spec is the yeah, it actually runs the assertions on the box. I've got a set of tests running at the moment, so I'll show you those in a little bit after they've run. But yeah, so if I just make that a little bit bigger.
So when would you typically run these?
So yeah, so the spinning up the box itself, the master and the agent, it takes between 7 and 10 minutes for a Linux box. For a Windows box, it would take a little bit longer. So at the moment, you'd run them on demand for yourself. If you go, okay, I've made a lot of changes to this role, I want to assert that I've not broken anything, you can run it on demand. But long term, I think Stacker and Liam's goal is to have Jenkins run it, maybe on a schedule. It's going to be really useful for those guys because it means when they start mucking about with all the base components that we all depend on, they can see immediately if they've broken higher up the chain. But yeah, so the server spec syntax is really, really simple. So you can do really simple stuff like just commands. So you can just expect the standard out or standard error. Yeah.
Andy, do you think there's, and this might be a really dumb question, but because I really don't know anything about PoppetVault, but would there be a way to use, like, I feel like maybe it'd be faster with Docker instead of VM, like possibly for testing? Do you think this? Maybe I'm just this totally doesn't type check this.
Yeah. The only thing is, so if you use Docker containers, then it's probably going to be faster to do it in Docker. In most cases, we're all using standalone machines. To be honest, it's kind of something that you probably want to you probably look to Beaker to do.
Yeah.
So I'm
because there's probably a way it probably extracts over that in some kind of provider fashion.
Yeah. I say now I know shit all about Beaker. So Liam was the guy who put this in. So for now, I think it's a good start. There's obviously progress to be made because 7 minutes is a bit. The thing that takes most time is spinning up the Puppet Master, because obviously it has to go away and get all the gems and install that, which takes the time. So if we get a pre-compiled image of the Puppet Master all ready to go, then fine. The only problem there is then if you've made changes to the master code, then it has to reflect. So yeah.
Cool. So how will this work? So assuming we have 100 roles we want to test, right now we spin up 100 Puppet Masters and 100 Puppet roles.
So you can run Beaker with a set of options to tell it not to destroy after it's done its run, which means you can then just keep running the RSpec tests, so you can iterate fast. That's probably the simplest way at the moment, is just to say, okay, I can tear up and tear down my agent, leave the master running, and then just apply the roles. It does take a while, but that's because our Puppet roles take a while. It just physically takes a while to apply. Yeah. So until we can get the application time down, I think the role, our location API role, I think takes 2.5 minutes to apply, which is quite a while. Yeah, but the acceptance tests I think do have value, but not as a CI every time you check in something. Yeah, the feedback loop is too long, so it'd have to be
more for the other guys.
So it'd have to be run either on demand on your machine or on a scheduled job. Jenkins would do it once a day or whatever. Sorry. So back to the RSpec handlers. The default ones are all Windows and Linux. So you can assert simple things like files. Should be a file, should be a directory, should be a socket. You can do apt packages. So package HTTPD should be installed. You can have fluent helper functions to say with version. It's all really friendly, nothing magic about it. You can assert, again, services, should be enabled, should be running, should be installed. You can do IIS things as well, so you can assert on an IIS app pool, dead easy. You can specify .NET version. You can assert on the IIS websites as well, and link it up to the app pool. Should be in the app pool and have physical path, all that sort of thing. So this is all really, really friendly. There's no magic here. Has this finished? Yes, this is finished. So Beaker's just finished. So I'm going to switch across to show you. Where's Hangouts gone? Yeah. Bear with. There we go. So if I just so you should be able to see that. So apart from all the crap up here, so if we scroll all the way to the top as far as this shell will let us, basically you can see the output from Beaker. It's running the Puppet role. And then so that was the first run. Then it runs it a second time because we told it to. And then you can see the server specs are passing. So what's useful is it shows you when it's compiling down to a command. It will show you actually the command that it ran as well. This is really useful when debugging failed tests because it means you can actually then SSH into the box and go, well, what did you actually return and why did you return that? Am I just stupid? And again, I mean this example finished in 4 minutes. So it's not terrible. So that 4 minutes I think covers the Puppet run and the agent spin up time. It doesn't cover the master spin up time, but yeah, 4 minutes. If you have to do that multiple times before you push something, it's not terrible. So yeah, I think that's probably covers it.
What command did you have to run to?
So the command I ran, hide that. Oopsie. So you can target the file just by, so it's essentially a Ruby file with, you run bundle exec rspec. So it's an rspec test with some fancy bits on top. The Beaker environment variables are needed. At some point they'll go away, and this will be wrapped in a rate task, so you can just rate the file that you want. Is it worth me showing you some of the Beaker setup? So the Beaker setup, and I've got to switch windows again. So node sets. So this is the Beaker configuration. It's dead simple. So that's configuring the Puppet master, and that's configuring the agent. No magic.
So the Beaker environment variable put in the command ties into what?
So there's a Beaker runner. So if we go, so this Beaker underscore set,
Yeah.
that. So if we look into the spec helper, which is somewhere here, spec helper acceptance. There we go. Can you guys see that? So it's requiring some gems for Beaker. So there's a plugin there which has a service spec helper for Beaker RSpec. So yeah. So the Beaker environment variables are picked up by Beaker RSpec, that gem, when that runs. And this is the configuration for saying, well, what do you do when you spin up the master? It's all, I mean, it's kind of write once, really. It's relatively simple. Just says, well, if you're a Windows box, you set some log directories. If you're a Linux box, do it the other way around.
When you write tests, you assume that any shared includes like Linux base have already been tested. Basically, you don't test those, you don't touch those.
Yeah, so Stacko and those guys have already written tests around Linux base. As the tests are being written and maturing, you can basically assert on whatever the hell you want. It doesn't really matter. If you want to go all the way down and assert the Linux base stuff, if it affects you, then I would probably do it. So if you're relying on something from the Linux base, like setting users or that sort of thing, then you can probably assert that. We basically said in our base role, so this actually comes from a shared base one, but because we rely on it heavily, we want to assert that it's actually applied there, which it's just preference, really. As we go along, yeah, hopefully all the profiles will have tests around them. I don't know how deep Stacko and those guys are planning to go, because obviously all these come with an overhead, actually having to run the damn thing.
That's a good point. So is the onus on the teams to go on that test, or is that
so at the moment, the onus is on the teams. If you want acceptance tests around your roles, then yeah, go and do it.
But there's no you have to have them.
No. So this is still pretty new. Yeah. So Stacko basically came to me and said, well, we've done this and we've written some sample tests. Can you just go away and write some tests and see how it performs? And I love it. It's really simple, and it gives you that little bit of confidence, because the only other RSpec tests we've got at the moment are kind of asserting higher configuration, which is all very well, but
Is there anything on the wiki, like a kind of quick intro, demo, tutorial type thing?
There's enough in the actual project. There's enough sample code in here that you shouldn't really have a problem, along with serverspec.org. The Beaker configuration you don't need to really know about. Just know the command to run.
More like the command, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean we can add that to the wiki, to the README. I think it's already there, in fact. If it's not, I'll add it. But any other questions? Any questions from you guys remote? Cool. All right then.
Which one?
Nice one.
That's one.